So welcome all. Welcome to this seminar, this presentation. I think there's a bit of feedback with this microphone now. Welcome to this seminar, this workshop on learning from country consultations to date. As you know, country commitments are at the heart of the OGP process. And at the heart of the country commitments is the idea of very active and engaged consultations with civil society, both in the development of the action plans and further going on. Now, OGP is a really still a pretty new baby, a pretty new initiative. And so with that as background, I do think that we've got a lot to learn from our first efforts. And just the process of thinking through what we're doing consciously all the time is going to be really important to building the initiative from a very strong base. So in the spirit of OGP, we've got two government and two civil society representatives to talk to their experiences today. From the government side, we've got Undersecretary Bonmoya from Philippines, and we've got Chris Vane from the White House. On the civil society side, we've got Samuel Rota from Proetica in Peru, and Kamara Oleksi from the Civic Partnership for Supporting OGP in the Ukraine. So three very different regions, or four very different regions, but all facing a similar challenge of how to start a very new process and a very ambitious process, working with governments or working with civil society in a very new way. So that's it for the opening. I think what I'll do is just go through as the panelists are listed in the program and start with Undersecretary Bonmoya and ask him to talk to us for 10, 12 minutes or so about the Philippines experience. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you. I was hoping you'd go upwards, but after attending several sessions, I realized that I had to throw in my original presentation because it's too long. In all the sessions, we overspeak, and there's no time for question and answer. So I'm just down to 4 things from the inside. So yay! All right. The first one is. I guess the audience of my first point is the CSOs. Right? The first one that we learned that will help us moving forward in relation to the CSO is that we should, I think it will help a lot if we drop our notion that government is homogeneous as far as transparency is concerned. In our country, we don't have a deep sense of participation and consultation. It's a process that we're just starting now. We need to accomplish many things very quickly, but you don't create a habit and a culture on a fairly quick basis. So that's part of the challenge. And the reason I'm pointing this out is that there are groups of reforms, transparency reforms inside government, and they need to deal both inside the government, which is what we do, and they have to deal with the CSOs. Clearly, the CSOs are impatient. In our particular case, they are impatient about the passage of the FOI, which is just right. What I guess we need to share with you is that you gotta cut us some slack, because even inside government, many people will not benefit from transparency and therefore would want to keep status quo. So as far as transparency is concerned, it will help if you do not assume that if government says no, it's a homogeneous across the board. So I guess that's the first one. And then the other part that we wanted to share with you is that more than the consultation, and we did, when we crafted the first craft, this was an executive initiative. Secretary Abad came here, he said the country will benefit from more transparency and accountability. So it was clearly a government executive decision. And oops, when we found out we needed to consult the civil service. So there was a checklist to attend to that. And we realized that more than consulting, what is more fundamental is creating an environment of trust. In our particular environment, in our particular case, civil society organizations or non-government organizations were part of those that actually ousted many government leaders. They were at the forefront. In 1986, when there was a dictator, the CSOs were part of those that created a critical mass. So that's been the tradition. So So I guess now this is for government more than the consultation. I think what we need to do is create an environment of trust, and it's essential for us, not just on the short term of fixing our 1-year OGP commitments, but rather ensuring that even without a commitment, these things will have to come in. The third point that we experience is that there's an undersupply of CSO. Prior to last year, everyone says, please talk to us, please talk to us, please talk to us. You need to hear our voice. And when we said, you're right, then why don't you come in and we'd like to encourage you to participate. What we realized is there aren't enough of them to participate in many activities. So the second component is that apart from engaging government, there should also be a parallel effort to have a capacity building for the CSO, so that when you get what you asked for, then we're ready to make the most of that. And then the last item, which I think is the more interesting one, is that upon yesterday, when I scrapped the whole presentation over bossa nova music, what we realized was that it wasn't so much that government engaged the CSO. What really struck me last night was that it was actually the CSOs that engaged government in our case. So much so that our secretary is from the CSO. And then when I ran through all the departments, now government, that are in the forefront of reforms and transformation and transparency, these are former CSO people. So I think the key is not so much for government to engage CSO in an active and aggressive manner, but for CSO to engage government in an active and aggressive manner. We try to define CSOs as people who are apart from government and are not involved in electoral politics, because they think that going into politics prostitutes their advocacy. From our experience, what we realize is that people who actually engaged in politics and are able to put the right people to make the right policies have produced this fruit. The new president came into power just less than 3 years ago. And already reforms as far as transparency is concerned have borne fruit. So I guess that's the other part. It's not so much government, again, engaging, but I think the key there is that for CSOs to actually engage government. The others are really just how we went about it. I don't think you want to know that. It's a bit boring, so we just talked to several people and all that stuff. So maybe if it's relevant to you, you can ask later, and then we'll appropriate the remainder of the time for them to ask questions.
Thank you very much. So next, let me call on Samuel Rota from Proetica.
Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. I'd like to present the Peruvian process, drafting the action plan and making the public consultation. I have a disclaimer to do before getting to the speech properly. Proetica, the Peruvian chapter of Transparency International, was a member of the steering committee in the country, which was in charge of prepare the draft of the action plan, along with another 3 organizations from the civil society and 4 public institutions, 2 from the government and 2 independent public bodies. And so I am talking about the process as a civil society representative, independent civil society representative, but also I was very involved, deeply involved in the very process. So I'm kind of, how do you say when you are this identity crisis, you know? But maybe it's something good, because the open government partnership encourages a new relation between governments and citizens, but also encourages a new relation between civil society and governments. So maybe this identity crisis is a part of this evolution to something, I hope, good in the short term. Okay. One of the key ideas I want to share is that the Peruvian process has been as open and participative as it can be within the timeline limitations and scarce resources, both economic and human, to make to prepare the documents and to carry on the consultation. I already talked about the executive committee that was put in place by the government and called civil society organizations, following the spirit of the OGP steering committee, and we work very hard to produce a draft of the action plan. Of course, there was a number of discussions between the steering committee, because as you said, NGOs are always pushing for more, and public institutions are always saying, "But you can do this. This is not going to work." The Ministry of Economy is going to say there's no money for that, and things like that. And we have, I think we have a very productive document after all of this discussion. After that, we put a consultation process, a public consultation process, and also a consultation process within the state, the very institutions of the state, because, as I said before, only 4 public entities were part of the steering committee, and even when a lot of letters were cursed to other ministries and municipalities and the regional governments, and it was very hard to get answer to the action plans. For example, the judiciary were answered very good, very enthusiastic, but the legislative never answered a letter sent by the steering committee. So we had to deal with this monster that sometimes the state, not the government, but the state is, and then this is the consultation within the state and the government, but there's also the consultation with the public, and here we have we put in place a website within the presidency of the Council of Ministries, which was the leading public institution within of the process, and they put in the website the document as was formally required, and we carry on a number of activities as as a civil society. We had a contact with a lot of networks and civil society organizations and all of that, but even these contacts and this call, we have a limited response from them. You know, there are hundreds of NGOs, just talking about NGOs in Peru, but only a small quantity of them answered and sent submitted their inputs to the draft. Of course, we're talking about the most important NGOs, but okay, who says which are the most important? This is a matter of legitimation also, but it's something we had to deal with. And But what was useful for the draft was that these leading inputs that we received from the leading NGOs in their field was not only reduced to the governance and citizenship organizations, but also we did receive answers from environmental organizations, human rights, rights of the women, working in education and health and different areas. So it was very useful for the draft to get all of these different points of view, which really added a lot to the document, to the original document. We also received submissions by individuals, citizens on their own, which get informed of the consultation process and prepare their inputs and send the email. So it was very encouraging because we didn't we didn't have in mind that kind of inputs, but then we said, okay, wonderful, very, very, very important. Very few, okay, but very important to know there are individuals involved in this. A number of other initiatives were also put in place, but some other NGOs and some other organizations, and very different from those in the steering committee. For example, some digital activists created a blog, which is gobiernoabierto.pe, gobiernoabierto.pe, in which you can get you go there and you can edit the draft, and finally the edited document was submitted to the steering committee. So there was this valuable side, the bright side of the consultation, but there are a number of cons. There was the pros. This is the problems, the obstacles. First of all, something I already mentioned, the scope of civil society. Only a few NGOs, not to say labor unions, not to say professional associations or think tanks, but this is something that was lacked in the process. These inputs from these kind of organizations, and the consultation process was very focused in Lima, which is the capital of the country, and we live in a very centralized country, and well, most of the inputs came from the capital. So it's a challenge to go to the rest of the country. It was difficult to raise awareness between a broader audience. We put in place some communication tools, but it was very difficult to generate this environment of trust that Bon Moya was talking about. It's very, very difficult. You have to take into consideration probably some other things. Peru is one of the, according to the regional index of the Latino Barometro, is a country that showed the most distrustful citizens just after Brazil. So there is very hard to deal with distrust in the country. And finally, we have in Peru, we have a law on different laws on participation and different spaces formally created for participation at local level. Why we didn't use them because it was very hard to match the time to get resources to get them. They are very known to be very weak. So with the limitations I said before, it was not going to be useful. So we have to make like a gambit, a sacrifice. No, we have to sacrifice scope and to get the most inputs, the most reliable inputs from the different organizations, and finally, all of this. If we make a balance between the good things that worked and the things that not worked, I might say the consultation process is very important. And it's not only a matter of a discourse, a speech, a theoretical idea from the OGP. It really works if it's carried with political will, with openness, and but you really need to invest on it. If you are a government and you showed your political will to sign the letter and send them to the OGP, okay, invest on your consultation process, because people and organizations and even your very public institutions in different levels of government, in different fields, have a lot to say. And that's something that we, as a steering committee of this process, learned at the end of the day. So thank you for your attention, and thank you for your attention. Okay.
Samuel. I'm going to turn now to the US and ask Chris Vane to talk through their process.
Thank you, Warren. My name is Chris Vian, and I am the Deputy United States Chief Technology Officer for Government Innovation. And the reason I say that is simply because it helps you understand where I come from. I tend to come at open government from what open government can do, which is to create a better government, a more efficient and effective government. And open government is a tool in order to make government more innovative, or is an innovative tool in and of itself that can be used by government. So just a little bit of context on me and how I approach this. The second thing is we've talked a lot about failures and the fact that we don't really usually talk about failures when we are at conferences like this, because of course we want to put our best face forward and not do that. I don't know that I'm going to go as far as to admit my failure, but I will admit that I came to Washington about a little over a year ago, and I didn't know what civil society organizations were before coming to Washington. I had never heard the term. I didn't know what they did. I didn't know that they existed. And so it was an amazing journey for me, and I think for the civil society organizations in the back of the room who had to work with me to probably educate me as to the role of civil society organizations and the very valuable things that come out of a very public discourse that isn't always nice, it isn't always productive, but it does push the envelope and does, as Samantha Power said yesterday, act as a forcing function for good things to happen. So not exactly a failure, but I will admit that it was different. So I want to do something slightly different because great comments from my colleagues on the panel so far. I'm going to take a slightly different role and say that when we put together the action plan, National Action Plan for the United States, we actually had 2.5 years of work already done, and we built our National Action Plan on those 2.5 years. And so what I'd like to do is step back a minute and say, if one looked at what the United States went through over the past 2.5, 3 years, there are probably 5 attributes or steps that we think are important to not only have a great plan and implement a great plan, but also involve civil society, citizens, businesses, anybody, because this is about public engagement. This is not just about one segment of the public, it is about the entire public. And what I'd like to then do by reference is show how we've tried to engage all publics in the development and implementation of our plan. So the first area that I always say is that it starts with leadership. In our case, it started with President Obama on the first day in office with his, I think, Lisa, what was it, a presidential statement on openness, basically. And by the way, Lisa Ellman in back is my partner in crime from the Office of Management and Budget. So say hello to Lisa. Basically what he said is that for the United States, open government is about 3 things. It is about transparency, it is about participation, and it is about collaboration. And they become the 3 pillars of our plan. And in addition, and the great role that Lisa plays is he tasked our Office of Management and Budget with giving distinct and very clear direction to all federal agencies that they had to implement open government with those 3 pillars and come up with very specific and concrete steps to implement those 3 initiatives or those 3 pillars in 24 plus federal, major federal agencies. And so the first thing I'd like to say is that the President himself acted as our first level of public engagement. And I say that because he obviously felt strongly about it, but he continues to feel strongly about it to the point that when a head of state comes to visit him in the Oval Office, he will ask that head of state, where's your open plan? Where's your national action plan? Let's talk about that national action plan. Let's see what we can do to work together. It is absolutely critical to have that kind of leadership and support, and dare I say, willingness to let us experiment and come up with unique solutions across the federal government. So that's the first one. The second is that it takes a fairly well thought out governance process in order to make this work. Because we chose at that time, before the National Action Plan, to have these 24 to 30 individual agencies doing their work. And we decided, like any good government organization, we needed to have a bureaucracy to do that. So we created a steering committee of very senior level people within the agencies and the White House, led by the White House. And that group had and continues to work very closely with the public, whether that be civil society, whether that be business, whether that be the legal people in our system, whomever it is. They have constant engagement and involvement with those people across American society. That gets fed into the actual implementation and implementation of the President's plan. In addition, we bring together every agency on a monthly basis into a big room like this, and we sit down with them and we talk about what's working and what isn't working. And we hear from them what we at the federal level or at the leadership level can do to help them. And we also hear from them who they're talking to, what civil society organizations, what businesses, and really hear from them that input on what we should be doing in order to create a better strategy. So it's very much a two-way street. And again, it's not always fun, but we really build, I think, a great team around open government. And what we do is use that team to reach out into every federal agency and get others excited about what we're doing. We've done a lot of speaking in this conference about the role of technology. And as a chief technology officer, of course, that's really near and dear to my heart. But I'm not going to talk about that per se. What I'm going to say is technology is a tool that we use, hopefully effectively, in our open government work. And to bring a little bit of the innovation piece into this, we do a lot with data and releasing data. And I think we've learned a lot about the use of data and how it can be effectively used in open government. We started off just by putting tons of data out there to see what happens. And we learned that just putting out data doesn't really matter that much. It's what you do with that data that becomes important. So what we started doing is creating communities of people around data, so health or energy or education or manufacturing. And we create a place where people can see not only all of the data about that one particular issue, but also what applications or what services have been redesigned or built as a result of that. And we use prizes and challenges or competitions to get our public involved with us in creating value-added products or services as a result. So technology is used as a tool here to extend the conversation to people that normally don't care about policies or procedures, but they do care about how government actually affects their daily life and what changes we can make to make their daily life easier. And that's what we use communities for. So the third example of public engagement is really using technology to engage more and more people in the conversation about the role of government and how open government can actually make government better. The fourth is the process we actually used when we created the National Action Plan. When we started our National Action Plan development process, we were very clear that we were going to build on the great work that our agencies had been doing already. It wasn't something that we were necessarily going to start over and redesign a whole new process and come up with new outcomes. And part of that was simply a timing issue. The plan had to be done in September. We started this process in June or July. That meant we only had a couple of months to get all of the work done. And so we made some conscious decisions in order to get it through all of the gates of approval, that we weren't going to create a whole new process. We were actually going to depend on all of those levels of engagement we've already talked about. And civil society really became important during that process, because not only did they let us know what they thought should be in the action plan, it's really become after the fact that the true kind of collaboration has happened, because as we released that plan, and they were fairly supportive of that plan, we've actually worked with them. And if anybody was at the United States and Canada session yesterday, you heard Patrice McDermott, head of one of the larger groups of civil society organizations, say that she gave us probably a 10, 15-page document that took every one of our 26 items in our National Action Plan and gave us detailed information on how civil society organizations felt we could make that better. And what we're doing is, for most of them, we're actually meeting with the civil society organizations, with our agencies, with our partners who are actually implementing those of the 26. And we're sitting down and we're listening in detail. We're sharing, can't do that, impossible to do that, great idea. We've already done that. All of those kinds of things are happening in that discussion, and I think as a result we're getting to a point of not only a stronger relationship with civil society, but I think we are developing a much better living document or a living national action plan on open government. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop, is that I think Patrice leveled some criticism at us yesterday and said that we hadn't done enough to really go out and, as other countries have done, Brazil being kind of the poster child for that, of developing a national conversation, of going out to the states and the local governments and really extracting or getting all of that detailed information from every citizen across the country into us. We didn't do that. For various reasons of which you've heard, we just didn't do that. And I think it is perhaps a weakness in our plan, quite frankly, that we didn't do that. We are trying to figure out how to do that in a diverse country like the United States, a very large country, and therefore difficult to do. But we actually, to address this, put something in our National Action Plan, actually, called ExpertNet. And the idea is, how do we take technology and create a platform for much more robust discussion with our citizens, and it's a requirement. I've got to do that in the next 6 months, to come up with that. And we're trying a whole bunch of different methods to do that. But the idea is not necessarily to get opinion, although opinion is very interesting and good, but we're more interested in fact-based information. You know, really, you can go on Facebook, you can go on Twitter, there are a myriad of platforms that we can hear from our citizens, businesses, nonprofits about what they think. We want to know, what are your concrete recommendations? What really can you advise us to be doing and give us proof on what's working? And so I'll just close by saying, has it been a perfect process? Absolutely not. Are we proud of our plan? Yes. Have we learned along the way? Absolutely. Is it a living document? Yes. And we and Lisa and I and others, kind of in the whole panoply of levels of government in this country, are attempting to get better at it, and I think build it into the culture, into the DNA, if you will, of the federal government in the United States. Thanks.
Chris, the last speaker now, Kamara Alexei from Ukraine.
Good afternoon, dear friends, or good evening if you are from Europe like me. Usually I don't speak English too much, so I prepared some speeches cards for me, and let me use this sometimes, please. Well, I come from Ukraine. This is a special country where a geographical center of Europe is located, but at the same time I come from a country what a long time, for 70 years, was a part of the Soviet Union, one of the most closed political systems in the world. And very important background with our country joined to OGP initiative half years ago. So we come in Brazil with the Ukrainian team of civil society and the government representatives, and bring here a very, very good national plan which consists of nearly 80% of suggestions from civil society. But I think we should speak today about some lessons what have found our country thanks participation on OGP initiatives. And I think these lessons can be useful, may be useful for all of us, for all people who now sit in this room. So, lesson first. Lesson one. It's good to know what each local or national body of power in Ukraine has a civic council which was created within it. And it's more than 600 civil councils in Ukraine. But unfortunately, they are not very efficient, and their expertise is rather low quality. So when Ukrainian government decided to conduct national consultation between these civic councils, we realized guys from Ukrainian government want to conduct pseudo-broad consultations. And we are right. This process was on the Christmas time, and any real Ukrainian NGOs didn't take part in this consultation. But we suggest more than 400 offers to National Action Plan in Ukraine, and these suggestions was very quite general character. And it was very, very suitable for Ukrainian officials because thanks with the wording, they can prepare suitable for them action plan. What don't really they can conduct, they don't really can do something with it. And this didn't link to our coalition of more than 60 active NGOs, which I head of and which supported by Soros Foundation in Ukraine. Actually, I represent Transparency International Ukraine, and as you know, our organization usually push to government and move them to real reforms in different spheres, for example, in Open Government Partnership Initiative. and in this situation we made the second lesson. When we start our negotiations between with Ukrainian government, we was like two mules who met one another on the bridge, and any of us don't like do something for change our mind. And it's normal because yes, we have same position, but we have different arguments for them. Ukrainian civil society didn't like this is very general document which name National Action Plan, but Ukrainian civil society, Ukrainian government has special view about us, like about strange people from civil society who do something interesting but nothing concrete and nothing useful for government. And after a long of consultation, big advocacy campaign, we changed minding of our power, and now we have great action plan, and our Prime Minister present him to the big community, which was more than 150 NGOs from the whole of countries. But also we have another lesson. As you know, Ukrainian civil society in each country can conduct alternative action plan and bring into the steering committee of the OGP initiative, and we use it. It's really helped us. We was in the very close contact with steering committee and ask them for help us, and after some mails, some letters from international organizations, from steering committee, from different international partners of Ukraine, Ukrainian government changed their approach and really involved civil society in this process. Well, but when we have same point of view with Ukrainian government on this point, on this challenge, we have another challenge for all of us. In the middle of February, Ukrainian police closed the most popular Ukrainian storage of movies and on music because they have some problems with copyrights. And Ukrainian citizens made massive DOS attacks to some government resources, including sites of police, leading party, Ukrainian government, and so on. And they blocked all of these sites for the long period of time. And only our resource of civil society coalition was the one source for OGP initiative, for consultation process for all citizens of Ukraine. And on this process, in this period, we conducted a network of regional consultants of OGP initiative in all regions of Ukraine, and we organized consultation between 500 real working local NGOs in Ukraine. And these NGOs help Ukrainian government create real and normal action plan in Ukraine. But if you speak finally, if I should summarize results of experience of Ukrainian in this process, I should say some words about new challenges of the consultation process and new challenges about next steps in our country and maybe in your countries too. Now we have a special body. This is a national work group created from representatives of civil society and governmental officials who respond for implementation of OGP initiative. And I'm one of the members of this working group. Now we signed a number of memorandums with international organizations who work in Ukraine and do something on the area of OGP initiative, for example, in IT technologies or involving whole civil society and so on and so on. But and now we have a special government body who charge for this initiative, but we have not real consensus between civil society and government and Ukrainian government for first steps for real implementing of OGP national plan in Ukraine. And it's very interesting what international pressure Brazil sun, for example, burn more stronger on the heads of Ukrainian bureaucrats than angry look, for example, Ukrainian presidents. Only international pressure, only real will of civil society can help government, for example, in Ukraine, do something real in this kind of initiative. So my final remarks is now we have three very open questions or very open issues. Okay, yes, we have some challenges with civil society, don't be capacity, lack of capacity, and different ideas about who should be as a priority. But how you want really involve civil society, not only by where IT resources, for example, special platform for sites, but in the real life, and with in similar rooms as for another. Why you do it? With first question. Second question, what you do with the results of this consultation with expertise? Because in Ukraine, we very conduct some consultative meetings with any real changes. We have a lot of papers, but any real working dogs. And last questions, how we can help ordinary citizens understand what OGP which is useful for them. How you can do it? And now our Civic Society Coalition do anything possible for involved ordinary citizen for using OGP tools in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kumara. So at this point, after four very interesting presentations, let's open it to the floor. Questions, please. Don't be shy. We take all questions. No questions too stupid. Yeah, please.
Well, in very specific terms, there was a moment in the previous administration where there were a lot of corruption, and it wasn't an open system. The same guys who are now leaders in the current government actually went out not only to criticize, but actually did more than that and engaged in an activity that allowed them to elect a president that is more transparent and open. So I guess in that very specific case, they have crossed the threshold between merely participants in a building society to actually engaging them in the political arena. So that's, And if you notice the speakers in many of the forums, the ones where their advanced transparency and openness are led by leaders who they themselves were part of the movement that wanted this thing. So I have yet to hear a nation asked to speak about their OJP coming from a tradition of the leadership coming from the regular business as usual leadership. So I think there's a direct correlation between success of transparency initiatives with the leaders that actually were out of the original loop and actually came in from the outside.
Thanks. I'm Jonas Roulette from the Open Society Foundations. So we talked in an earlier session a little bit about two faces of open government. One is service delivery, very popular, and the other is democratic empowerment, very contentious. And since the focus of this session is what happens beyond the consultation process, I'm interested in your views on how you manage conflict. So in the case of the United States, for example, you might have different interest groups who are pushing very different agendas when it comes to open government. In the case of Ukraine, you might have a case where the government wants to empower gongos instead of other more critical voices. And just to complicate things further, you know, the definition of civil society that we're using here is mostly NGOs, but several of the speakers made reference to individuals, to trade unions, you know, the list goes on, political parties, trade associations, universities. So there are lots and lots of voices out there, and we can't expect them all to agree all the time. So how do you deal with this issue of conflict?
Chris, you want to start?
It's a great question, and one that is evolving, and sometimes we do better, and sometimes we don't do so good. I think the short answer is our approach to developing and implementing is multi-leveled and multi-participant. So we're trying to get at that as much as possible. So the very fact that we are meeting with 1,000 different small businesses and hearing from them what we as a government need to be doing and how open government can help, it really helps with that. And actually, we've not had a problem with trying to keep everybody happy with what we've done, because we're doing it at all of these levels, and because we have broad enough strategies at the top, we allow our federal agencies, we are working with our states and our cities too, to actually implement the strategies and carry forward the plan. So I honestly can say we've not had that much problem in the United States with competing interests or one party being demanding and not getting what they wanted. So for whatever reason, it's not been a problem for us.
See, Bon, did you? Please go.
Okay. In Ukraine, we did 3 very concrete deals. First of all, we involved in this initiative best Ukrainian experts on the areas where OGP plans should be conducted. Best experts on access to information, anti-corruption, so on and so on. And they prepare their version of action plan, and so it was very concrete document. And the second stage, we involved UN office, United Nations office in Ukraine, and they help us, and they was a facilitator organization with our negotiations with Ukrainian government. They host our meetings in their office, and it was very, very useful for us, because it's very important and very authoritative organization in Ukraine. As you know, Ukraine was one of the creators of UN 60 years ago. And in the first stage, we was in the very close contact with OGP steering committee, and sometimes one of the months they sent mails in Ukraine, hey guys, what you do, how we can help you, what you think about OGP civic society coalition, and so on, so on. And it's really doing. It works. Use it.
If I may, open government, there's still a governance structure present. Open government does not mean that everyone will come together and have an agreement. I think the minimum requirement of open government is that if a decision is made, they have to explain why and what are the basis for the decision, whether they agree or not. So there are governance structure inherent. We have conflicts in the family. There's just one burger. You need to divide the burger. Mommy gives the burger to one guy. The next guy gets another burger. It's existent. It's been there for a while. Mommy needs to explain better why our little boy gets the burger and the big girl will have to wait until tomorrow.
Samuel, any advice on how you can divide
well,
the pie?
I think the key issue here is to have things clear. I will take, for example, in our process we didn't have a conflict of interest of any kind, but let's see, for example, usually controversial issue, like, for example, the transparency in environmental information. You can have, for example, business from logging, not illegal logging, but from logging, ask you to no. I'm not going with that. I don't agree with make more transparency on that issue. Okay. Well, you are going for more transparency, so there's no discussion here. In other cases, well, you really have to open that discussion and hear the different positions and take a decision. And in this case, it's very important to make that process of discussion, of debate, transparent, obviously. No? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point around the openness of the process is really important. And maybe to add to that is also the opportunity for citizens to have government to reply to them. So I think if you're making if you making suggestions to government, one of the most disempowering ways for that to happen is it then goes into a black hole and gets lost. So I think a number of countries, Chile is one of them in particular, and I think Tanzania started doing it as well. It's included in their commitments, a commitment from the government to reply to every written consultation, every written suggestion, and to do that within a particular time frame. So I think those two factors together really help citizens to feel part of the process and having been taken seriously, even if their priorities were not the ones that have made it onto this year's action plan. Yeah.
I am Lia Henni from Estonia E-Governance Academy, and following the discussion, I can understand that each country has its own story, but I'm not going to tell Estonian story. I have two questions. One to the government representatives and another to civil society. Open government is very much about to change democracy and to have more representative democracy. What is your opinion about the involvement of legislative branch in this process? This is a question to the government representatives and to civil society representatives. What do you think elected representatives, how to make them as a partners in this process to strengthen the role of civil society? Thank you. How to make elected representative of people involved and supportive to the open government process? Thank you.
So, an excellent question. And in the United States, we have three primary branches: the executive branch, which I'm a part of and where the most of the open government work is coming out of, the legislative branch, and the judiciary. And certainly, the legislative branch understands open government. They have been exploring it on their own and working on it, and we are certainly open and have made probably limited, but a number of forays into the legislative side, asking to start partnering and start developing. I think that is one of the areas that we should and probably will be focusing on very soon, is reaching out to that particular branch. We hear from a lot of folks in civil society as well as other parts of the American society that that is ripe for open government and participation, and I think you will see that coming, but it's going to be slow, and but it will happen. The judiciary branch, not much discussion with them at all about that, at least at the federal level. And I think some of us have been having this discussion that a lot of this innovation, I'll use that word, around open government, actually is happening at the local level and the state level, at least in the United States. And so I think the impediments perhaps are much easier to get around in the local government. I know where I come from in San Francisco, the legislative branch is very much interested in developing their own open government work. And so I think what we're trying to do is figure out how to understand what's happening in those areas and really build and scale some of those solutions. So it's coming, and it needs to happen, and it's just happening slowly.
First, let me admit that the Open Governance Partnership, the Transparency, is an executive branch. We're similar to the U.S. We have the judiciary, independent from the executive and independent from Congress. In fact, we impeached our Supreme Court Justice last December precisely because they were not transparent enough. He has not yet, they're still undergoing the process of reviewing it. So that's an active engagement. But in the end, respecting the autonomy of each group, the true influencers shouldn't be government to the other branch of government. The common constituent is the citizen. So what we need to do is not build an open government, but build an open society partnership. Open society elects the proper government that appoints the proper judiciary. So the bigger answer is to create a culture of openness and transparency in the people who, in the first place, elect the leaders anyway. It's just not going to happen in a year. OGP just wants a year slice. But the true meaningful heavyweight things that we need to do, just like in all relationships, are really daily, continuous commitment to create an environment to foster these things.
Samuel, how can civil society engage elected representatives?
Oof. Such a question, huh? Well, first of all, it's very hard in particularly in my country, the weakness of the political party system. We cannot talk about a political party system because we don't have political parties. We do have political organizations which conform each election and dissolves then afterwards. And then it's very hard to appoint the elected representatives because we do have thousands of elected representatives. If you have a strong political party system, it would be easier to reach them because you talk with the heads and probably you can make it easier. But if not, you have to go one by one, and sometimes you have a positive answer. Most of the times you don't. As I said before, during the building of the draft, we asked the Congress for their inputs, and they did not respond. They did not answer, and this is a problem because some of the commitments need legal reforms at the Congress level, and it's an obstacle then. And how? Well, this is going to be a very, very slow and difficult one-by-one case, and trying to get the key stakeholders and those who get more influence. I think this is how are we going to need to work with them in the next few months.
Kamara, just one minute. I think Bon wanted to follow up point quickly.
Let me give you one very specific example. I come from the executive from the Department of Budget. We hold all spending. So Congress requires what we call a Priority Development Assistance Fund, which is really just pork barrel. So what we told them is that you will not get your pork barrel if you do not give us a listing of all the recipients. And automatically when they do that, before the release of the budget, all those items are posted online. So for the first time in our history, that used to be a very lump sum, ambiguous, murky numbers. Now it's all disaggregated, it's all on the website, it's in the Department of Budget website, it's listed there. Unfortunately, only 400 people visit that website a day, which proves the point that sometimes even if data is available, people don't necessarily get them. But that's one way. In DBM, we have a degree of coercive powers. The other part of the things that we have done, but this is in the executive, is that if you do not post your budget and the winning bidders in your website and your budget the last 3 years, we will withhold releasing of your succeeding budget. So that's one of the interventions of a very active engagement executive can do for. We can't do that with the judiciary because they always invoke the financially independent clause of the Constitution.
Let me add some couple of words about legislative. It's really very important questions because, for example, in what we do in Ukraine, our organization open data about Ukrainian officials who involved in corruption, and we publish information about their problems in the several of websites. But unfortunately, in Ukraine, we have very bad law about saving of protecting data, and now we have some cases on the judge, how it say, on the suit, on the court, because we have problem with Ukrainian legislature. And actually, on the 5 priorities of our action plan, first point, this is change of legislative in this area. Second, this is ambition initiative on the governmental level, and third, this is real initiatives on the local levels. This is general structure of our action plan. But if we come back to the questions about involvement of elected representatives in the OGP initiative, we have a very interesting way or very interesting approach. We involve them on the implementation process when we ask them, please publish your asset declarations. It's one. And Ukrainian, for example, members of parliaments now know much about OGP initiative because we ask them about some of the points of our action plan, and they say why we should do it. We say because it's written in Ukrainian legislature and because it's written in our action plan, and now we want to conduct a national website or web platform with the all information about all assets of declaration of Ukrainian officials. So it's work, but not very easy. And another problems, unfortunately, in Ukraine, for example, elected people don't feel personal responsibility for different initiatives, for example, OGP initiative. Only authorities know really what they should do and why they should do it. Ukrainian people, elected people know, yes, I was elected this year, and only after 5 years I should do something about my real work. But 5 years I can do everything. Ukrainians don't because I was elected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I actually think this is one of the issues that we haven't thought enough about in OGP, and there's a big tension clearly. I mean, a number of the comments have pointed to the potential role of the legislature as an obstacle to open government. But I think there's also another part of this equation, which is the legislature and the Supreme Audit Institution have fundamental oversight roles in terms of the Constitution. So we have to find a way to balance these two issues. And while I think the primary relationship, accountability relationship, is between the executive branch and citizens, I don't think we can expect citizens to be the sole providers of accountability in a country. There has to be an accountability system within which legislatures and Supreme Audit institutions fit. So maybe that's just part of the longer-term challenge that we have. So thank you. There was another question here.
When we talk about that, making those data useful and understandable is more important than just making it open. So especially it would be difficult for those disadvantaged people, poor or the elderly people, to understand, use those data. So can you introduce some of the measures you take to address this issue? And do you involve civil society in this process? And what's their role? So that's my question.
Anybody want to go first?
I thought 36 hours away and 12 time zones away, I wouldn't get a question from a pure Asian. But that's a difficult question, and yes, that's true. I guess the quick answer is that we need to capacitate them, clearly. But there are some things that might give us some insight on that not much work can be done. We have to trust that they know what to do. For example, 1 of every 3 families in the Philippines have access to the internet. 90% of those have access to Facebook. None of them has paid any training to use Facebook. None, zero zips. And yet they actively use that methodology. What's the point there? Citizens, when they feel there is a need for these things, will find a way to use this, whether we help them or not, if it's important enough for them. We think it's important for them. They don't think so. Then we need to engage them in a dialogue, the same dialogue that government does with CSO, the same dialogue government will do with the citizens directly. And it should be the same dialogue that CSOs will have to do with the citizens. These are the data, this is what it means to you, and we need to do that. In the end, open government provides for a more efficient use of resources. Hopefully those resources will be rechanneled to education. Because the critical item that we need to teach is not for them to read the numbers, but to allow them to have critical thinking in our educational system. Hopefully the money we save by the efficiencies of open government will be rechanneled to create an education system that will then create a more open but critical society.
Yesterday, when I don't remember the name of John, the guy from who made a presentation about the school, the imaginary school, I was thinking about a Peruvian school in the Andes, because 8 out of 10 children doesn't understand what they read. They cannot make minimum mathematical operations, and we in our country we have this digital gap very big, and the action plan of Peru identifies this as as obstacles that might be addressed and faced. And we do have a digital agenda for the country, and we put within the commitments some measures to strengthen it and make it work and in the next years. And but we do know that's such a problem, and that's going to be an obstacle. That's why we are also taking into consideration another element, another ways to make information transparent, not only the digitalization, but using radios, radio stations are very popular in the rural areas, in poor rural areas even, and using the old paper to give information to the people and public audiences, so the major can be can be accountable to their citizens and on how the budget is being spent. These are provisions on the law on transparency, for example, and in the action plan these elements are strengthened.
Hello, I'm Daniel Clark with America Speaks. Civil society organizations have been very involved in the consultation process with the U.S. government, and I guess if the panel could speak just a little bit about the challenges of promoting open government internally, so across all the different departments of the executive branch. I know in the United States, within of course, there are a number of champions for open government tasked with trying to promote and implement it across all the different departments and agencies. Very large, complex organizations. So appreciate hearing a little bit about that, please. Thank you.
So in the United States, a little bit of detail. When the instructions went out to all of the federal agencies in the U.S. government, there was to be 2 individuals who would lead open government work in each agency. One was a senior accountable official, because we knew that in order for this to work, there needed to be a leader who was empowered to remove obstacles, appropriate money if necessary, whatever it was going to take in order for open government to work in that particular agency. The second person that was mandated was the person who actually was the person who did it every day, whose job it was to focus on open government and really create and work within the agency in order to not only learn what needs to be done, but put that plan together and then implement and follow up on it. And so every agency had to come up, and still does, and we hold those people accountable within each agency for the work of open government within the agency. We found that to be particularly useful because when something is wrong, for example, we are now getting the second version of all of those agencies' individual open government plans. 2 years ago, they wrote their first version, and now they're writing their second version. And some people are late. Some people aren't doing a very good job, and we're holding those individuals accountable for the creation and implementation of the second plan. So I think that's the first point to your question. The second is that Lisa and I, when in the development of each of those new agency plans, actually sat down with every single agency, their accountable official and or their person who is responsible for the plan. And we talked with them about what's working, what isn't working, what we can do to help, all of the challenges. And the number one thing we heard from those people was about this issue of change, about creating culture change, about inculcating the principles of open government into the DNA of the organization. And that while it's still a long way away from being perfect, what's happened over the 2 years is that has actually started seeping down into the organization. And people understand open government, and they're not looking at it as just one more thing to do and to check off on a box, but they're actually saying, no, that's the right way of doing business. And to us, that's the true definition of open government, and we know when we've been successful, when we will actually have changed the culture of government to embed these principles in their daily activities. It's happening. We know we've got a lot more work to do, and we support that as much as possible, but to us, that's the true indication of open government.
Yes, it's true. What in Ukraine we have very involved civil society in OGP initiative, but in US we have very involved officials in this initiative. It's true, and I think it's very good for us. Why? Because the first person who told me about OGP initiative was any person from Ukrainian government. It was person from U.S. government, Ali Cross. Half years ago, he come to Kiev and say, guys, maybe you know we have OGP initiative. This is very interesting, but we say, what you say? What is it? How it help us? And after, when we come back to U.S., we asked Ukrainian officials about OGP initiative. We haven't any information. But Ukrainian president signed declaration about joining Ukraine on this initiative. Any Ukrainians from Ukrainian government, nothing know about this. It's very interesting. After that, when I was in my business trip in US, and I saw some guys from State Department, from State Department, they asked me, you know something about OGP initiative? I say yes, but I don't know how we can do it in Ukraine. And they explain me what is it and what we can do. Because in this period, we haven't special website of OGP initiative, we haven't any tools and any ideas what we can do. So I think it's good what U.S. government very involved in this initiative. It's good baseline for involvement in other countries. But actually, it's normal now that we have very involved civil society in our countries and governments who understand what is important and useful for them. Thanks.
Warren, if I could just, there was part of that question I didn't answer, and I'm sorry about that. It was the role of civil society in that. And I think that we started 3 years ago with the senior leaders having the relationships with the civil society organizations and not necessarily the individual agencies in the federal government or the people in those agencies. I think by us working and engaging at the federal level, at the broad level, and showing that there is a positive relationship that can be developed, it can be beneficial and useful, and showing how that can be beneficial. Over time, we've worked with our individual agencies, and they now depend, in some cases, on open government to actually help them think through their issues, help them deliver their solutions. And so I think the other piece is that what we've tried to do is maybe be a bit of a parent with our federal agencies and say, look, this is a great thing, it's a great positive, it's an asset you should take advantage of, and slowly but surely they're realizing that and actually using civil society to actually build in value to their plans.
Chris is the nice guy in government. The real solution is really to create a culture. Okay? However, there are tools available now that we employed precisely to induce the behavior. What are those? First, the Department of Budget can actually create law by putting a special provision in the budget. It has the effect of law. Specifically, in our budget this year, 2012, we inserted a provision that mandates, under pain of going to jail, to post and make transparent in their website certain things. So those are available for us as tools to start the culture of. Second, we pry the information for them. You know, the U.S. in terms of, I guess, transparency culture is like a teenager. We're like a 2-year-old. So you have to pry it away from them. How did we do it? We instead of requiring them to submit data, we actually created. We are currently creating a software where they don't even have to submit to us anything. The system that facilitates their business in disbursement, in accounting, is immediately captured at source. So once we capture it at source, then it's available to us and to the public posted. So we mandated the use of the budget system, agency budget execution, and the disbursement to use one single web-based application that immediately facilitates their operation, but and aggregates that data immediately. On the country action plan, we actually again coerce the agencies. The level of engagement and transparency in our government is not the same. So we actually use the same tools of transparency. This is what you told us you will do. It's on the web. Everyone can see it. And this is where you are as of today. You don't need to explain that to us. You just need to explain that to your constituents. We just publish it.
Thank you. Government's not homogenous. And changing culture means that you sometimes have to go up against vested interests, I guess. You
Warren,
agree with that?
Warren, on that point. I think another thing, because we are a complex government organization, are sometimes appropriately criticized for being too complex, too hard to deal with. I think that, with all due respect, civil society organizations can be just as guilty of the things that we are guilty of. And I think what's been difficult for us in the United States is just knowing how many civil society organizations are out there, who's speaking for whom, because like us, you're not consistent either. And so it's been a really learning experience for us, getting to know you and work with you. And I think in the United States anyway, it's been a valuable process because I think we have worked together to do that. But it is sometimes quite daunting to be on the government side trying to work with civil society, but just not knowing how best to do that.
And I mean, just to follow on from that, civil society is definitely not homogenous. And I think that there, particularly in the open government discussion, there are sometimes schisms or big gaps between parts of civil society. The open government debate itself is often engaged more urban, more think tank organizations that deal more intellectually with the concept of open government and evidence of impact, where citizens, I think, connect much more with issues of service delivery and the provision of water and provision of education. And I think we've got a challenge here within civil society, how to create a dialogue within civil society that crosses those boundaries. And so we begin to really reach very deeply into civil society and help citizens understand the connections between transparency, openness, which can be rather intellectual concepts, with the delivery of water, the better delivery of water, the better delivery of education. So I think that we definitely face that challenge here. The other learning you made me think about is some of the naivety perhaps we had at in some of the initial thinking around the Open Government Partnership. So I think and I guess thank God we were naive, because we would never have tackled anything like this if we really understood the challenges. But some of the initial thinking was that what we needed to do was to reach out and find the perfect champion in every country. And that champion, if we managed to bring them on board, they'd be able to shepherd the country's engagement in OGP. And sometimes that worked, where we chose exactly the right champion and had the right leverage. But sometimes it actually backfired, because we placed that champion back in the government context where they could face a lot of opposition from other members of the cabinet, from other government people, and particularly maybe from the Foreign Service, for example, that weren't involved in OGP at the beginning. So I think some of the learning we had is how to then make sure that we could use make sure that these champions could then reach right through to the presidency and ensure that we have a presidential commitment to OGP. And that's one of the ways in which we've tried to address this issue, but that's not sufficient.
Thank you. Magnus Ansell, CIO Sweden. It's been really interesting discussion this, and I've come to the conclusion that one of the strengths of the concept of open government partnership is that it can mean anything to anyone. And after listening to discussion, maybe we shouldn't ask all these tough questions, just stay pragmatic with the issues, because there's a lot of difficulties in here. In another session, I heard the concept of get rid of the notion that government is homogeneous. And one thing we noticed in Sweden was that it was not obvious who in the government that should pick up the mandate of OGP. And we had a bit of a discussion in there. It started off in the Foreign Services, ended up under the IT minister. And I would like to ask you guys in the panel, did you have similar discussions, and how did they go about, and what were the arguments for where it ended up? Thanks.
When we start prepare process in Ukraine, Minister of Justice of Ukraine was responsible for this initiative, and I think it was most bad, I don't know, most worst variant in Ukraine, because unfortunately its ministry do nothing about real involvement or not involvement, real implementation initiatives like OGP. And after our negotiations with Ukrainian government, now we have first prime minister who personally responds for OGP in Ukraine. But unfortunately, we are from bureaucratic region. It's nothing. No. Yes, he responds, but he has a lot of duty in other areas, so he haven't time for this. And now we have a special agency. This is National Agency for IT Development of Ukraine, and they are responsible for this initiative. But unfortunately, we haven't enough capacity, for example, staff, resources, and so on, for normal implementation of OGP in Ukraine. And we created a special body from representatives of civil society, from governments, and from international community who want to help Ukrainian government conduct this well. International community want to help with funding, we want to help with expertise, and government want to do something. Thanks.
Well, in Peruvian case, we have legal provisions which state that all of these international things are a matter of the Foreign Affairs Ministry. And that is why the Foreign Affairs Ministry has a chair in the steering committee. But the leadership of the whole process is in the office of the Prime Minister. So these two bodies have to have the main responsibility, and then you can. For me, it's a surprise that somebody from the budget office is here. I just can't imagine that in Peru. When we submitted the draft to the Ministry of Economy and Finance, they answer, this cannot go, there's no money for this, there's no money for that, there's no money for that, there's no money for that, so they cannot. And it's good because, well, not good, but it's okay because it's by law and you cannot go against the law. So it's kind of surprising. I think I don't know if the OGP has some at what extent the discussion in the OGP has gone to who has to deal with this. What's the profile of the champion? I don't know.
Personal opinion. This is not the opinion of our state. It cannot be DFA. It cannot be foreign affairs because this is not a foreign activity. This is an internal commitment to improve your own lives. Following that, most likely it should be under the office of the president or the office of the prime minister. However, coming from your word pragmatic, I think the best group is precisely the one that disburses the budget. You don't make it transparent, you don't get anything. From a purely pragmatic point of view, and it's not that and that's not because we sat down and decided the best way to implement this is through the pocket. No, it's because Warren, I think, invited our budget secretary, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise. The seed just fell in the right ground. Because in many instances, I guess in our particular case in our country, there's an inherent coercive power for reform from the budget management, because we disperse, not only do we craft or influence greatly the budget and the spending priority, but the execution of the budget goes through the Department of Budget. And to some degree, it can influence which one it can encourage to be spent properly and to discourage from being spent properly.
The United States started off domestically, obviously, from what I described. And then when the National Action Plan came, it became much more involving the State Department or the international folks. And so it's probably a hybrid, and obviously Samantha Power involved in both sides. We've been very lucky in that we've had strong leaders who have seen the advantages of it and whatnot. I don't know that I disagree with my colleague about whether it should be an Office of Management budget. I do agree that certainly you have certain authorities and certain abilities in the budget side, or as Lisa is in the management side, to actually cause things to happen. But what we tried to do in developing open government in the United States is not make it punitive, to try to create positive levers or positive environments or whatever it was, positive, to make people want to do this, not have to do it. And I think the other thing I would say is it's much more expedient to use the power of the budget to get things done. But if you have time and are willing to put in the effort to take a longer-term view, I think you start with that and then you move away from that over time to really creating a much more positive environment so people don't feel they have to, but they want to.
Having said what I said, I actually agree with Chris 100%.
I'm just going to take a question first from the person at the back who hasn't asked yet. There we go.
Okay. Thank you. I'm from Buenos Aires. And going back to the subject of public engagement, I wanted to ask you about what you think about is the role of the cities in open government. I come from a country that doesn't have a law of information implemented, but I come from a city that does have it, and we'll just launch open government 1 month ago. So I think that cities being like the centers of innovation of the world, I think they should, I don't know, I would like to listen to your opinions about cities in open government. Thank you.
Well, I'll start off by saying I couldn't agree with you more, but again, I come from a city. So, and a city, San Francisco, California, we started down this path of open government without calling it open government and not knowing what we were doing years ago. So I do think that cities are obviously different from federal government. So I think it's not the same. And I think it's appropriate that we started at the federal level. But I think now that we've got this experience with open government at the federal level, I think it's very interesting to take our lessons learned and start applying them at the local level, because I think local governments are much closer to service delivery. And so different set of challenges, much more products and services rather than more esoteric discussions about transparency and what that means and its value. And I think second, as a result, you can actually experiment more. You can perhaps be more innovative in how you apply the principles of open government because you have fewer impediments. You still have impediments. I'm not suggesting it's going to be easy, but I think you have a smaller base to work with, a smaller set of people that you have to convince to do it, and cities just are all facing a restriction in resources, increasing demand, and the fact that citizens expect the technology to be there to support what they get from their bank or from whatever other service. They're expecting that from their government. And so that demand forces cities to do a lot of things that they have to do to survive. And I think that forcing function is very, very important for open government.
Yes, I definitely agree with Chris. But I think the question here is how to take the open government partnership franchise to the cities. In Peru, there's the municipality of Lima, which affects where a third of the population of Peru lives, and they have the willing to make a transparent government. The last year they launched the Open Data Portal webpage, and they have been active in the process of the preparation of the draft, submitting their inputs, and yeah, I totally can see the municipality of Lima with this very colorful logo, but I don't know, is that possible? Maybe it's a question for the steering committee.
I think if anybody has had a chance to talk to Tim Kelsey from the Great Britain, who is assuming co-chairmanship. You will know that he feels very strongly about this, and I think has basically said that we will be focusing on cities coming up in the next year, and is looking for people to help us think through all of those issues, models, requirements, attributes. I mean, there are so many things to think about. Do you just take everything we've done on open government partnership at the federal level and just copy it down to states or cities? Probably not. But some of it can, and I think over the next year, I think we will be able to work on some of those issues and hopefully have a session next year on how this is working with cities.
We're coming to the end of the time, and I think there are 2 questions, so 3 questions. So let me take 2 new people, and if you don't mind taking up your question privately.
Actually, I don't have a question. I have more a proposal.
A proposal? Okay, let's hear the proposal. And you've got the mic, so.
I think it is important because it's obvious that the future of OGP will depend on who will take responsibility, who is domestic owner of OGP. And my advice is that maybe steering committee, not asking only who is a contact point in the OGP country, will ask who is politically responsible person for OGP, and to reject all answers that this is a foreign minister. It's very difficult to domesticize OGP initiative. It's a really hard issue to get a proper answer to this question. So it is what I can see, how international community can assist to solve the important issue. Thank you.
So just before we close, 2 very quick questions, and then we'll finish it up.
I'm Nele Leosk, also from Estonia, and I have a question that builds up on Samuel Rota's remark, not having enough resources for the proposed actions. So my question is, how much you manage to integrate OGP proposals to the already existing action plans of your government and involved institutions, to all the government representatives and the others? Thanks.
Galib, if you want to ask one quick question, maybe directed at one of the panel.
I'm Galib Abazadeh. I'm representing the civil society organization from Azerbaijan. A couple questions, very quick questions.
Let's try and keep it to 1, maybe. We're almost at the end.
One of the role of the United States embassies in the republics, in the countries, and what do you think about that, and how they can involve to this process? The second one, how we can motivate our government counterparts, not just push demand, but they alongside motivate to work with us, with civil society. And last one proposal, is what do you think about the regional workshops for civil societies representatives, exactly focused on the working with the government representatives or counterparts?
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to make one final comment and choose which of the 3 questions you wish to respond to.
Shall I answer to her? Well, we did 2 things against the lack of allocated resources. One, take them out of the draft and hope to get them included in the process to update it, or re-elaborate the commitment. For example, we had a commitment about to create a national entity to safeguard the right to access to information, which we don't have in our country. And the ministry said, okay, you won't have money for that because it hasn't been discussed in the law of budget, in the budget law. So we re-elaborate and we wrote, start a discussion to implement the national entity to safeguard access to information rights, and those were the two things that we do against that problem, that obstacle. Thank you.
Warren, could you remind the questions? Because in Ukraine now we sleep.
I'll rephrase one of Galib's questions for you. How can you motivate people in government to work with you on OGP?
Well,
what have you found works?
We told them about different type of benefits, reputational benefits, image benefits, financial benefits, and so on. It's really work, because now we have very pragmatic leading party in Ukraine, and they calculate how it costs and what we can do as a outside as a result, and okay, we do it. Okay, it's normal, but it's in the next second stage. Now, what we do now, we collect best practices of implementing LGP initiative on the different spheres in Ukraine, because access to information, campaign to corruption, and so on. This is not issue only LGP initiative. So in Ukraine we have very great examples of real work of local government or national government and one of these issues. And now we have a competition between the regions and saying, "Hi guys, your neighbor do it. If you do it, you have more money, more reputation, so on, and it's worked." And the last questions was about. Sorry, no, that's only this.
So I'll take your question on the budget issue and the whether there's enough resources in order to do it. And for the United States, it was a mixture. So we had some new stretch goals that, quite frankly, we were stretched by civil society organizations to do, and we accepted the challenge. And some of them were things building on that we were already doing and knew that we could do. Again, for the period of time that we had to develop it and the period of time of the action plan. I think, the future action plans will take and build on that, and build and build and build based on all of the inputs and all of the experience that we've got going on. But I think Warren, we're honored to have him as our chair for this panel for his role, his evolving role in the Open Government Partnership. And I think there are two things that have come up over and over for me this past day or 2 days, and that is this capacity issue. We are asking government to do more and more things, and with, to your point, fewer and fewer resources. How do we make sure that government can actually live up to the expectations of open government? And that's a capacity issue. And there are answers to that, but I think we need to be very clear that this is a challenge for all governments, including, the United States or other developed countries. And the second is that it's wonderful to have this discussion, perhaps esoteric discussion, about the value of open government, but what we don't do a very good job of setting up the process to prove that value. So how are we actually improving, if it's all about the citizen, how are we actually improving the life of that citizen? What are we doing and how can we measure it? Because I think back to the questions about how we engage government and how we excite government and want to do open government, it's when we prove that it works. And I think we need to really focus over the next year on telling a better story on open government.
Can I just answer the city question? What about the city? I think should it go down to the city? Yes. Will it? Yes. The city will naturally take its leading role in all this implementation. But my issue, to throw back the question at you, is capacity versus need. The group that actually needs more transparency are not the cities. By definition, the cities would probably have a built-in transparency. The ones that need it are the ones in the barrios, in the boondocks, that actually cannot do the transparency. So that the challenge is, and we should not preoccupy ourselves with how the cities will take it in, because they will. The proper question is how the uncapacitated barrios should take it in.
Just, Caleb, to come to just 2 points to close us off. And the first is that there's some very interesting research coming out now from the IMF that shows that greater openness, greater transparency actually improves access to credit on international credit markets. And it's strong, persuasive evidence, and it's some of the first evidence we've got. And I think that's a very important point to be able to make to government. The second point is, I think, one of the enormous missed opportunities that we've got so far in OGP that we need to find a way to correct is that we're engaged in the most fascinating experiments, and there's an incredible opportunities to document these experiments and generate the kind of evidence that we're looking for to tell the convincing stories on open government. It's a new area. We've got anecdotal evidence in most places, and we need to put a lot more resources into writing up, documenting these experiences. Maybe this is one of the points we can take back to the steering committee and find a way to invest greater resources in. So thank you very much, everybody, for keeping so engaged for 2 hours. And thanks to the panelists for their insights.